Good evening. I'd like to call the Monday, March 11th, 2019 Eden Prairie Planning Commission meeting to order. Would everybody stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right. First item tonight is the approval of our agenda. Does anybody have any comments about our agenda? Not many things on it. One public hearing. But if you have any comments, please do so, or I could entertain a motion.
I move we approve the agenda for Monday, March 11th, 2019.
Okay, a motion by DeSanctis and a second by Kirk. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Second item is the approval of our minutes. These are from Monday, February 11th, 2019. I think everybody got that in their packet. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes? If not, I would appreciate a motion on that also.
I'll move approval of the minutes of the February 11th meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second that emotion.
Have a motion from Higgins, second from DeSanctis. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next item, we don't have any informational meetings this evening or public meetings, but we do have one public hearing on a project called Beverly Hill. It's a request for zoning district change from rural to R1 9.5 on 6.86 acres, and a preliminary plat of 2 lots into 17 lots and 2 outlets on 6.86 acres. I think we'll work it this evening to have a presentation by the applicant if they're here. And then after that, we may ask you a few questions, but then have staff give a staff presentation, and then we'll open it up for public comment from the audience if you'd so like to make some comments. So, thank you for approaching the podium. If I could have your name and address, and welcome.
My name is John Anderson. The address is 14832 Estate Avenue Southeast, Prior Lake, Minnesota. And I know we've got a little presentation. There we go. So what we have here is a 17-lot single-family detached subdivision. It's on 2 properties, one located on Eden Prairie Road, which is 9800 Eden Prairie Road, the other one on Beverly Drive, 16540 Beverly Drive. The developer of the project is Great Oak Second LLC, and the owner is Mark Gergen, who's also here in the audience tonight as well. And I'm the project manager, so Mark and I are kind of working on this together and looking forward to developing this project in Eden Prairie. The location of this site, as I kind of mentioned, is in the northwest corner of the intersection of Beverly Drive and Eden Prairie Road. And there's a property on the very corner, which you'll be able to see here in an aerial photo, maybe a little bit better, but the 2 properties highlighted with the red are the 2 properties in question. And as I mentioned, there's one on the corner there. To the north of this site is about a 15-foot strip of land that's owned by D.R. Horton, who previously developed the project, I think it's called High Point at Riley Creek, kind of to the northwest of us there off Prospect Road. And then there's 2 additional properties north of that site that are sitting there. Then north of that is the Airport Commission property for the runway area. As you can see, there's existing structures on both of these properties. The Eden Prairie Road property has an existing house. That house is going to remain as part of this development on its own lot. And the structures on the Beverly Hill property, or Beverly Drive property, excuse me, are going to be removed as part of this. And that's where the main cul-de-sac and lots are going to go. Here's a map showing the preliminary plat. As you can see, there's 17 lots. 11 of those lots are off the cul-de-sac. That cul-de-sac does have to be renamed. I guess a couple of names we proposed are similar in nature to other street names. We have not gotten that finalized, but we will have a new name that works with the city's naming system. There's 3 lots that'll have direct access onto Beverly Drive. Those 3 lots are kind of facing north-south, and then 3 lots proposed to come off of Eden Prairie Road. The northern lot would be the one with the existing structure that's currently there. And then there's 2 outlots shown in this development as well. Outlot A, which is kind of a triangular property up in the northwest corner. That's going to be a stormwater pond, retention basin, infiltration area. And then Outlot B, fronting onto Eden Prairie Road, is actually going to be another infiltration basin to handle stormwater for the site. Here's the site plan. Gives you a little more detail as to where the houses will kind of sit on these lots. Shows the cul-de-sac and the actual curb and areas like that, and potentially the basins and things of that nature. It also shows the existing house up on Eden Prairie Road at 9800 there, Eden Prairie Road. This is the grading plan. The majority of these lots, especially on the cul-de-sac, will be walkout lots, full basement walkouts. There will be a couple lookouts there. The lots facing Beverly Drive and the ones on Eden Prairie Road will be flat lots based on the lay of the land. And if you're not familiar with the area out there, the property down on Beverly Drive, or excuse me, on Eden Prairie Road sits much lower than the property up on top of the hill. And as you can kind of see, there's a area in between those lots on Eden Prairie Road and Beverly Drive up there that's going to remain wooded. There's quite a bit of trees in that location. And by putting this cul-de-sac in, we were able to retain quite a few of those trees as part of the project. Also, with the grades, we're able to keep the grades at a very good position to allow for views and nice on those walkout lots there. This is the actual landscape plan that's being proposed. And as part of this landscape plan, we are removing some trees on this property. We will have to replace those trees per the city's tree preservation ordinance. And I believe over 150 trees are being replaced on site here, so there's going to be quite a few trees going in. Most of the trees, in the pond areas and kind of in some of the rear yards we put in right away with the initial development. Some of the front yard trees potentially could come at a later date after the homes are constructed, so we don't have, cement trucks and framers and forklifts running into these new trees, and we can put them in after the fact when the lots are actually landscaped for final occupancy. Lot standards and zoning. The zoning right now is a rural zoning district, and we are proposed to zone this to the R1-9.5 district. Minimum lot sizes in that district are 9,500 square feet, and minimum lot width is 70 feet. The proposed average size lot within this development is actually 14,323 square feet, and the average lot width is 81.9 feet. The smallest lot in the development is 10,422 square feet. And just so everyone knows, the 2 lots down in Eden Prairie Road are the smallest of the 2 lots. And those will also be the most lowest priced homes going into development. Obviously, the frontage on that roadway and the design of the lots just contributes to that factor. The largest lot in the development is over 20,000 square feet at 20,254 square feet. Home construction, there will be covenants and architectural guidelines that will apply. I know in the staff report there was a list of items that we had put together and submitted with the application, and that'll kind of be the guidelines that we'll be putting in place, and we'll be using those guidelines when we actually draft our final covenants for recording with the final plat. Approximate home prices will range from anywhere from around $500,000 to $900,000. It is possible we could have some higher price point homes going into the cul-de-sac there. As you see down at the bottom there, these are going to be built by custom builders, so we don't have specific house plans that are going on each individual lot. Everything will be customized as the individual buyers come in. Our plan is to probably come in and build a model home right off the bat on the first lot on the right on the cul-de-sac. That's one of the bigger lots in there. It's over 115 feet wide. Make that kind of the model home to be able to sell into the other lots at that point. And like I said, as buyers come through the door, we would definitely look to customize what they can do out there. Like I said, it'll probably be a mix of 2-story homes and ramblers. We are seeing more rambler buyers out there these days, but we do expect a lot of 2-story homes that are very similar to the neighborhood in the area around this neighborhood. So, project highlights. As I mentioned, the houses and the buildings on 16540 Beverly Drive will be removed, and the house on 9800 Eden Prairie Road will be saved. Tree buffer, like I said, the way we proposed the grading on here and having the cul-de-sac allowed for us to save quite a few trees from kind of the lower area on Eden Prairie Road to the top. I know at one point in years past there was a proposal to put a through street to the north. If that was to happen, we'd have to export about 30,000 yards of dirt, and by doing that, we'd literally have to clear cut the entire site, so there would be no trees being saved to make that accommodation work. And that, therefore, the reason why we're proposing the cul-de-sac in the first place. It's really about a $500,000 swing in value to be able to put that road through, and it also makes the lots less valuable because the trees are being removed, the views are being dropped, because we'd have to drop the grade significantly to be able to get that to work. And by keeping a couple houses down on Beverly Drive, we can keep the top of the hill high and the bottom low, and then keep them trees in between there. So that's a big part of why we propose this. We feel that trees and doing that is going to benefit this development and the neighborhood as a whole by allowing values to be higher in there. And as I mentioned earlier, over 150 trees to be planted as part of the landscape plan. A couple other things I just want to touch on real quick. There's a bunch of conditions in the staff report. We went through all that. We don't have any issues with the conditions. There is one about the D.R. Horton easement that we're working through right now. That strip of land, we are proposing a sidewalk between lots 3 and 4 from our cul-de-sac up to Prospect Road. The problem is that strip of land that D.R. Horton owns bisects our property and the Prospect Road right away. So in order to get the sidewalk to connect, and we're only talking inches here at this location, we have to get an easement. I have notified or talked to D.R. Horton. They said there's another gentleman I need to talk to over there. He just got back today, but we have not received an answer as of this point. So that one there, and I have talked to the engineering staff about this, is in the works. We'll see where that one goes, but at this point, that sidewalk connection can only happen if they agree to some sort of easement. Other than that, everything looked good in the staff report. And like I said, I'm here for questions, and Mark, the owner, is also in the audience if you have anything for him as well. So,
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Appreciate your presentation. Commissioners, do you have any initial questions for the applicant? Commissioner Mezzi?
Just a quick question on how the ownership structure works. Is your company the actual custom builder, or does each home get built by potentially a different contractor?
No, the Great Oak Second LLC is the developer. It's not the actual contractor or builder that'll be buying the lots. So the way it's set up is Great Oaks LLC will come in, they'll sign the development contract with the city. They would hire the contractors to grade the site, put in the streets, the sewer, the water, and all the initial development infrastructure. At that point, Great Oaks Second would then sell lots to a custom builder. And the builders, we have builders that we're talking to right now, but we're kind of getting through the approval process and getting our bids done before we sign the dotted line, just so we know exactly where our numbers are at with the bids and the final approval, and if anything else comes up that we're not aware of right now. So we do have some builders in mind. They're local builders. They've built in this area before, and at that point, they would come in and buy those. And I would say it's probably most likely it'll be 1 to maybe 2 builders, but there's always a possibility that one lot could get sold to some other party or something like that. So.
Okay, thanks. That was my next question, so you answered that too. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I have a couple questions. Could you go back to one of your first slides, which is the preliminary plat? Thanks a lot. Lot 8, which is at the end of the cul-de-sac on the southeast corner, in the rear yard of that, Lot 8, there appears to be some kind of a diagonal drainage and utility easement going.
Yes.
That's not consistent with the plans that we received as planning commissioners. Do you know which plan
Yes,
version is current?
And I can address that. So in the original submittal, if you look on, and maybe I'll show this on the grading plan first. In the grading plan, if you look back there, there's a basin, an infiltration basin in the rear of lots 8, 9, 13, and 14. And that collects the water. And as you know, in the watershed district, any way water drains, you have to have some sort of basin to collect that. So we've got 3 different directions. We got stuff going northwest to Outlot A, going kind of east to Outlot B down in Eden Prairie Road, and we've got this area along Beverly Drive that's going to drain to that basin. Originally, we planned on having an outlet to that pond or that infiltration basin going across the rear of Lot 8 and then down the hill to Outlot B. Through comments with the city, and I think it was in the last round of comments, we looked at changing that, and the city suggesting draining that infiltration area out to Beverly Drive. So that old easement will go away, and that area will be regraded back there. We're actually able to save some additional trees, including one heritage tree in the rear of Lot 8 now. because our storm sewer outlet goes between lots 13 and 14 down to Beverly Drive and connects into the existing storm sewer in Beverly Drive versus going down the hill to that outlet. So it's actually a better design. We're saving some trees. That easement will go away, and I think the comment came, I believe, last week, so the revised version taking out that drainage utility easement, I don't believe it's been submitted yet, but that was just in our last round of comments here, the last few days ago, so.
Good answers.
All right, thanks.
Good answers. You played right into my hand with the heritage tree, known romantically as tree number 71.
Yep.
A 30-inch tree, red cedar, I believe, was within your erosion control fence lines to be saved, but it was called out on the landscape plan to be removed, and I was wondering why. So
Yes.
that's probably the
That
tree
is
you're
the reason
talking
why.
about?
Yep, and I think there's actually a condition in the staff report talking about regrading of that area as well, which is being done, and in this, like I said, it was just the most recent round of comments where we've seen that,
Okay.
to change that storm sewer. It actually, we like the design better. It's a better fit back in that backyard, makes that lot a better lot, so.
Okay, all right. And just because we're talking trees, and you said that you like trees, tree number 75 is another heritage tree that you're planning for removal, which is in the backyard of Lot 14, very close to the part of the project that we were just talking about on the northeast corner of Lot 14 is tree 75. It's another red cedar scheduled for removal, but it's within 1 foot of the proposed grading plan, the existing grade. So even if it took a very, very short retaining wall, it certainly looks achievable. And so I
Okay.
think maybe an additional effort to be placed on saving another heritage tree.
That's something we can definitely look at. Replacing heritage trees, it does mean you have to replace a bunch of new ones, so there is an expense to that, and if we can save that, obviously we don't have to replace as many trees at that point. So I'll look at that. I know there was some tight grades in that location, but I can definitely talk to the engineer and see if we can put a small wall possibly. I'm assuming, 2-3 foot wall probably it would take to
Thanks for your
possibly
consideration.
do that, so.
Appreciate it. Commissioners, any last questions of the applicant before we move to the staff report? Julie, would you like to run us through the staff report?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as stated, the request this evening before you is a request to rezone property from rural to R113.5 and a preliminary plat to plat 2 properties into 17 lots and 2 outlots. The properties, as the developer noted, are single-family detached products, and no PUD or PUD waivers are being requested. The project complies with all city zoning standards and performance standards requirements, including tree replacement, as was noted in the developer's presentation. As also noted in his presentation, staff and the developer have been working together to provide a pedestrian connection between lots 3 and 4 in order to provide that pedestrian connection from this development up to Prospect Road to at least link those neighborhoods from a pedestrian standpoint. As these properties have come in to the city for inquiries with regard to development, looking at the broader area, city staff has consistently been recommending the assembly of properties, because we've got a handful of properties in addition to these that are have potential for development. So staff has certainly been encouraging assembly when possible in order to take a look at economies of scale with regard to development, as well as look at taking a broader look at roadway connections. If you'll notice from the aerial map that you have a Prospect Road on the east side of this project, as well as a Prospect Road on the west side of this project. So as developers have made inquiries about properties in this general area, staff has, again, consistently communicated that a goal of the city is to maintain opportunities to connect Prospect Road in this area, east-west, north-south. So even though this particular project does not connect, provide a connection north to Prospect Road, staff does believe there are other opportunities to connect Prospect Road, whether that is an east-west connection, or if Prospect Road from the west were to extend into the easterly properties and then swing north and create a connection with Cirrus Way. So depending on what other development proposals we see in the area, other alternatives exist in order to provide those vehicular connections through that area. In your memo, as the developer noted, there's a fair amount of information with regard to architectural guidelines. During the last review of a single-family detached project, the Planning Commission had several questions regarding architectural reviews in order to provide rather than provide, to provide for diversity within the neighborhood so that we didn't see a lot of repetition in colors and materials and things of that sort. So as you can see, that has been accounted for in the staff report. The developer is proposing restrictive covenants that would be recorded against the property in order to clearly communicate those on the front side so that property owners would be fully aware of those upon purchase. In addition, the city has received comments from MAC on this property because it is in close proximity to a property that is owned by the airport. There were no alarming comments that were provided by MAC. They were the pretty standard comments that the city already addresses in the development agreement with regard to noise attenuation, planting of trees that they prefer that they not be fruit-bearing, things of that sort, in order to reduce conflicts. So I did want to communicate that with the commission, that there will be some additional conditions included prior to city council to reflect those comments, but nothing out of the ordinary that has come from that. Also in your memo, you'll see a paragraph dedicated to inclusionary housing. As you're well aware, that's an effort that is proceeding through the Planning Commission and City Council review and other efforts. So at this point, the Planning Commission is not being asked to provide a recommendation on inclusionary housing, but rather this is an opportunity to start that conversation with the developer, make him aware that those conversations are ongoing, and that we will likely extend further invitations for conversation with him as we move closer to a development agreement on that issue. And I believe that concludes my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Julie. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? Commissioner Villarreal?
About that last point, conceptually, would there have been anything stopping this developer, any developer, from asking for this area to be zoned for duplexes?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the property is guided for low-density residential development in the city's comprehensive plan, both the 2030 that's approved and the 2040 that's currently under review by the Met Council. So the use of attached, because I'm assuming by duplexes you mean attached units, are not something that is permitted in the R1 zoning districts. So it would have required a comprehensive plan amendment in order to facilitate the development of units of that type.
Okay, I just bring it up because, again, thinking of both inclusionary and trying to make best use of available acreage, it seems to me that perhaps there is an opportunity somewhere to expand the type of housing that can be constructed on some of these open spaces, to include things like duplexes, to encourage greater and diverse types of housing to be located at these places.
That didn't warrant a comment. So, commissioners, any other questions of staff? Yes.
I have one question. What about the access to the new city park, which I believe is northeast of this development?
Yeah.
And how will residents of that cul-de-sac transit that area safely to get to that park?
Is that a question of staff?
Yes.
Well, staff or the developer.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, there is trail and sidewalk facilities down Eden Prairie Road, so it'd just be a quick walk over down Eden Prairie Road to Cedar Hills Park.
So what would be the distance in meters, or?
That, off the top of my head, I do not know, but maybe quarter mile, half mile.
I think it's a quarter mile about.
Okay. I have a question. Julie, you had suggested to the applicant that they make all best efforts to assemble multiple properties, including probably some property to the north of this, which is still undeveloped. In your judgment, has the applicant made those best efforts?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in the 6 years that I've worked for the city, we've talked with a variety of different inquiries about these properties. When I say properties, it's not only these two, but probably at least 3 others as well. And as I said, staff's message has been consistent that assembly is preferred and would benefit not only the city in the review process, but the developer as well. And as you can see, we have an assemblage before us that is 2 properties, and there's a variety of different reasons that go into that. You know, property owners are at different places in their life. They have different desires and timelines than necessarily their neighbors do. So I'm confident that those conversations have occurred because we do hear feedback from inquiring parties as they reach out to other property owners. They do share some of that feedback back with staff.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, this is a public hearing. I would like to invite anybody in the audience who would like to speak to come up to the podium, announce your name and address, and maybe spell your last name if you would. All are welcome. Anybody? Sir?
Hello, my name's Chris Bunn. I live at 9850 Eden Prairie Road. That's the parcel that's not part of the development, the corner there. I had a letter I'd hoped to get to you guys in time, but I didn't know it was due last Wednesday, so I won't read it verbatim, but anyhow, I'll try to cover the highlights I had for it. We've lived there since 1998. We've been in discussions with several other development projects in the area. We were conducive to development. I was not aware of this development until last October. I reached out to Mark and his group when I saw a listing for this development and his name and contact information in your January, I believe you had an announcement that this project was coming up for discussion. I then contacted Mark and asked him questions regarding this project, and that was the first contact we had. It was in February. When I first saw the discussion of how this was to look, my first concerns were the lots proposed are inconsistent with the ones in the surrounding area. If you compare the lot sizes identified here with the majority, or actually the 100+ lots that are on the same guide plan area, 10 of the smallest lots in that whole area are going to be in this development. It's the lots, they have an average, which sounds good, but they have a very large standard deviation. Their lot sizes are very small and very large. And it works out as far as the classification of the numbers, but the impact on the area is not the same. Their request for the R195 zoning, which gives them the 5-foot setbacks, is also inconsistent. The other properties are all 13.5, and they aren't allowed to have such tight setbacks. In my case, the property to the north will be 5 feet off my property line, and to my west, I believe it's 10 feet or less. The lots are actually centered or off center in the north of my property to accommodate the drainage area, I believe, or some utility access. So they're utilizing as much as they can of the 9.5 zoning to accommodate the lot placement at, from what I see, at my expense. There will be no other neighbors who have to deal with this close proximity of housing, except for our lot. The original assessments for the lots, they had, of our parcels, I believe it was 11 units for the 5-acre parcel and 4 units for the 1.7-acre parcel. And so they're coming out with 2 additional units that were never accommodated in the assessments. We're still paying them off. What's happening in this case is you're asking the current property owners to subsidize the assessments that are being utilized for this development. I haven't heard mention of them being asked to compensate the city or anything for those 2 additional units. And finally, I sat through your discussion you had previously on the Crestwood development. It was similar density to this and so on, and the developer came in and had a fair amount of detail as far as what was going in. My concern here is there hasn't been a builder identified, and given there's such a range of lot sizes, sure, you might be able to find someone who wants to do a $900,000 house, but when you come down to the lots along Eden Prairie Road that are next to where I have to live, I'm looking at, I don't know what. I don't see them attracting one builder who's going to be comfortable developing at both ends of the spectrum. And with the request for the 9.5 zoning, I would like to see more details in mind, or actually have a builder who has a plan, as opposed to just developing lots and letting whatever else they can find go in those lots. It doesn't seem as though there's enough details to warrant the risk of seeing what might go into that lot. There's nothing other than the siting requirements and so on that really guide them as far as what they can put in there. The values can be all over the place. I just was not comfortable with that classification or that zoning without more details. The developer you had for the Crestwood one had more specific information to provide to you in terms of what was going to actually be going in. In this case, we don't have that. I would also like to know that with the zoning classification and the guide plan of 2.5 units per acre, I still don't understand. I've talked to Julie and bothered her quite an awful lot. I don't understand how we can have lot sizes as small as 10,000 feet and call that 2.5 units per acre, unless, of course, you're playing games with the averages of the open space and the developed space. So I would look forward to hearing some answers to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bunn. Appreciate your comments. We'll address those after we hear anybody else. Anybody else from the audience would like to speak, please? State your name and address, please.
Mr. Chairman, Dan Blake, 16831 Cedar Crest Drive, and I represent Pemptom Land Company as well. And we own the property straight to the north. I'm just going to make this statement. It's not, I don't want it to be a point of contention, but the developer never contacted us about assembly. I don't know if the terrain makes sense for a connection, but that was never made. I have a question for staff, and you guys can decide how you want to do question and answer. But is there a mechanism? There's been a lot of discussion about architectural guidelines, custom builder, plan variance. This is not a PUD. Is there a mechanism to enforce all those things, or are those just nice representations? And everybody has good intentions originally, but if different things happen in the market, does the city have a mechanism to enforce those commitments outside of a PUD is a question. Comment, I find it odd that in the staff report, staff presentation, there's no discussion of R113 on 3 sides of this site, and this being proposed to be zoned to R1 9.5, as Mr. Bunn just pointed out. I don't know if transition's important or not important, but it hasn't been discussed. I don't know if there's transition being done, but it hasn't been discussed. It just seems like it was thrown in there. These are going to be smaller lots, irregardless of what's on 3 sides of it. That said, I have no opposition to this development as it's proposed. It might very well be a very good plan. I also don't suggest that there should be a northerly extension of the street through here. However, it does reduce the options for Prospect Road connections, and if Prospect Road runs through the Pemptom 1.7 acre site, it uses up about, not quite half, but a very dramatic portion of that 1.7 acres, and it makes it nearly useless. And I don't know how to, I guess I'm just stating that as a, point. I could go on and probably have for other people on the road patterns out here, but it may or may not be directly impacted by what is being proposed here, because there's not a proposed extension, and maybe there shouldn't be, but by not having it, it reduces the options for Prospect Road through the Pemptom parcel, which is on Eden Prairie Road, adjacent to right at the north edge of the site, excluding that little strip that's owned by someone else. That's all I got. If you want to hear more about how the roads ought to work, I could tell you, but I don't know if that's an appropriate discussion here.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. And just to make sure I'm 100% crystal clear on the land that you own, I'm looking at the plat map, and that may not be the best point of reference, but you're north of the property, north of what I'm calling lots 6 and 17, which is, thank you. So, okay, for the commissioner's information and for staff in the audience, they own the property north of the subject property and on the east half abutting Eden Prairie Road. his land does not extend westward to the western boundary of the development. That's correct. And you said that was about 1.6 or 1.8 acres, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Blake, thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else from the public wish to speak? Please come on up and give us your name and address, please.
Yeah, hi, my name's Colin Gebhardt, and I'm at 16723 Beverly Drive in Eden Prairie. I live up on the corner a little bit, I think, east of where this will take place. But mostly I wanted to come just to talk about what the possibilities were of Prospect being connected. It's my understanding that Cirrus will never be because of the MAC and the way that the planes come in and that they land. So just knowing that all of the traffic has to route out Beverly, and the addition of all of the new 14 homes or so that are going to be positioned on Beverly and then entering that cul-de-sac, just all the additional traffic that comes through. And so I just wanted to, it's good to know that sounds like there still are potential options, but just wanted to make sure that that's a consideration as I live it daily. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll address that question. We'll probably put Mr. Schulze, our Assistant City Engineer, on the spot for that question in a moment, but thank you for your comment, Mr. Gebhardt. Would anybody else from the public like to step up to the podium? And yes, sir.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Meher Medida.
Could you spell your last name, please?
Absolutely. Medida.
Thank you.
I live on 16627 Beverly Drive. We own that place. This would be right opposite the position cul-de-sac, so we would be southwest, I think. Yeah. So my concern is also related to traffic. So in winter, the current road gets pretty busy. So and it is curved, and I'm concerned about the position of the cul-de-sac on the street. So when traffic enters, so it's already pretty close to the slope and a curvy road. So I'm worried that it may cause more traffic problems. So I just wanted to make sure it's up to the city guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your comment. Anybody else from the public would like to speak? Okay. Let's bring it back, and let's try and get a few points discussed if we can. Let's see. I think I'm going to go in reverse. Mr. Schulze, can you help us out with the existing slope of Beverly Drive, which is from the cul-de-sac that they're proposing heading east? I noticed on the plans it looks about maybe a 5.5% grade myself. And is that within city standards? And do you have any safety concerns for the neighbors?
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I would say that is within city standards. Are you talking specifically from that cul-de-sac down to Eden Prairie Road, or from the
That's what I understand, yes. That's good. That's the steepest part of the road. There's probably a little flat spot when you approach Eden Prairie Road for stopping, but it's a pretty hefty slope coming down.
Yep, and we have, obviously we have streets well within that range, and if you're under that 5% range, that's within our city standards. We try to usually make a landing at the bottom where you have an opportunity to slow down and stop on a lesser grade to make that stop.
By example of our recent harsh winter, are there any unusually high volumes of accidents on this street?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. My note-taking was a little short on Mr. Gebhardt's comment. Help me out. I thought that was a city staff one also.
That was more process, prospect connection.
That's right. Yep. Okay. About Prospect Road connection. That's correct. Would you like to talk about the city's current policy or desire to extend Prospect Road and the options of that configuration?
Sure. So one of the options, obviously, the obvious one is the two connections of the Prospect roads themselves. the city has looked at preliminary designs of how those two would connect together. They essentially, connect at Eden Prairie Road, come around Mr. Blake's Pemtom property, and connect down to the existing Prospect Road to the west. Alternate options, because of this development there, or with this development as it is, would be to potentially wrap that westerly edge of Prospect Road to the north to go into Cirrus Way. That offers other options for development through there as far as getting sufficient lots and sufficient access to this space. The comment of Cirrus Way never being developed or never being built is, I would say that's not the case as far as being never. There's already a road there, and we've used it for some temporary access for while we constructed some of those the projects through there. I think Mac's willingness to potentially have a road be built there and provide additional access is a possibility. Now, when that happens, I don't know, but to say never is a little extreme, I would say. So those are just a couple options. Obviously, connecting Prospect Road from Eden Prairie Road into that site somehow is still an option with another cul-de-sac somehow. But there are lots of those options that come up when these parcels do combine together. Not including the ones that we're talking about tonight. What's left there is the Mac property and a couple other properties that could still go together and leave us options for connections through that site.
Okay, so I'm hearing that the city desires some extension of Prospect Road from the west, coming east or north, regardless, when another development application crosses our desks.
That's correct. With the way that is left there today, that is fully desired by the city to make that connection through either to the existing Prospect Road to the east or to the north somehow.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Matty, it looks like you had something to add here.
Yeah, just for further clarification, so I can understand, let's say that this, all of these sites were actually assembled, and so instead of just looking at these two pieces, we were looking at sort of all of the 4 or 5 that are in that area, and so we had the option to design it the best way that we could in the most preferred way. Is this what is the way that, if this was a blank slate, how would you want to connect those roads, and does this development still allow for that?
Sure. I'll take a stab, and Carter can correct me if I misstep a little bit. With regard to preference, the city has talked about a variety of alternatives. As Mr. Schulze mentioned, the city has done some preliminary review. Developers have done preliminary review as they've looked at a variety of these properties. And at this point, I think the city does not have a singular preferred option. Our goal here is to preserve and reserve opportunities to make that connection, because the ultimate connection will, at least in part, be driven by development proposals as they come in and what they come in as. So the city needs to be flexible with regard to design in order to adapt and react and accommodate overall city goals in addition to development proposals.
Thank you.
Okay, let's try and answer the rest of these questions real quick. Mr. Blake asked about the enforcement of design standards, and I believe, Julie, you mentioned that they'd be covenants that accompany each lot sale. I don't know if I'm using the right legal terminology, but could you expound upon that?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, in response to Mr. Blake's comments, what the developer is proposing in this particular instance is covenants. Those covenants are private. They are not enforced by the city, so they would be recorded against the property and would be enforced through that mechanism. So the city does not have design standards for single-family homes in the same manner that the city does for commercial, office, and multifamily types of projects. As you're well aware, those types of projects require certain architectural standards from a city perspective, as well as certain building materials, percentages, colors, those types of things are all under consideration. The city does not have those standards for single-family residential developments. And as you can see, the city has developed quite a lot of single-family housing, and I cannot think of an example where that has been an issue, especially with the types of price points, that we are talking here. It is somewhat routine, not certainly always the situation, but it is routine to have covenants that are recorded against the property. Another mechanism that could be provided is if there is language built into the development agreement requiring architectural or material diversity. That would be another opportunity. That is what city staff is pursuing in regard to the previous development that the Planning Commission had a lot of questions on regarding architectural standards. So we're working to finesse and provide that language through the development agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure we commissioners will want to talk about the density of the project with the R1 9.5 classification, and we all know that there are different single-family residential densities available in our city. They exist next to each other, and just as a statement of fact, could you remind us all if there are any special transitions required between those subzones of R1 throughout the city?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so as you mentioned, the city does have a variety of single-family zoning districts. This is one of 4 that is being proposed on this particular property. And certainly, if you look throughout the city, there are multiple instances where an R195 zoning district may butt up against an R113.5, where a 13.5 may butt up against an R122. Certainly, the city is always in review of those applications, cognizant of transitions, and certainly wanting to provide transition where appropriate. In this particular case, the R195 zoning district is being provided. However, as you saw, the majority of I shouldn't say the majority, the average lot size is right around that 14,000 square foot. There certainly are some lots that are on the larger side, since that's the average, and some that are on the smaller side. And there are many factors that go into specific lot size, whether it's existing conditions, whether it's topography, whether it's saving of heritage trees that are goals and objectives of not only the city, but the developer. So, when we're reviewing development plans of this sort, one, we look for compliance with the standards. Comment was made about the setbacks for the R195 compared to the R113.5, and the R195 does allow for a smaller side yard setback. It requires a minimum of 5 feet on one side, but a total of 15 on the entire lot. The R113.5 requires 10 feet on either side as a minimum in order to meet those standards. So there are some nuances between the R113.5 and the R195, just as there are between the 13 and the R122.
Thank you, Commissioner Villarreal.
May I ask a follow-up, and maybe if Julie or the engineers or maybe the developer, what is the difference then between the mean and the average of these lots? Because the average will tell us one number, but the mean will tell us perhaps a slightly more accurate number of the diversity of these lots.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, not having done that math problem prior to the meeting, I'm not going to be able to provide you a specific number, but maybe some broader context about how density is calculated might be helpful.
Yeah.
So,
thank you, because there was a specific question about whether or not some outlot areas and drainage utility easements were included.
So the city of Eden Prairie calculates density on the gross of a development site, so that any area that is provided, whether it be an outlot or drainage and utility easement for stormwater ponds, or if there was parkland that was being provided or right-of-way that's being dedicated, the density is calculated on the gross. And that is historically how all density calculations have occurred here in the city. Since the 80s, probably since the 70s. But of course, the majority of our residential development occurred as a community in the 1980s. So the density is not being calculated any differently on this project than it has been on other projects. This project does fall within the 2.5 units per acre or less density that is required for a low-density residential guiding, and it falls within those parameters.
Thank you. I don't know if it's within our purview to attack the assessment issue. However, just to take Mr. Bunn's grievance up the ladder one rung, are there any comments from staff on the assessments along Eden Prairie Road?
Not necessarily being here when those assessments were leaned onto those properties, but knowing that definitely this probably wasn't the exact scenario, obviously, at the time of Eden Prairie Road being done. They took a shot at what those densities were, what those properties were, what the potential development was there. There may be some that were right on the mark and some that were off by, like you said, 1 to 2 units within a site like this. So that's pretty much all I can say is that at the time they had to account for so many lots within a open space like this.
Okay, all right. Just as a vague recommendation, Mr. Bunn, I may just have you contact the city assessor's office and take your issue up with them and see if you could get greater clarity. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was the one that was whispering and didn't realize my microphone was on. I would recommend Mr. Bunn contact the city engineer's office, not the city assessor's office with that question.
Thank you.
Just so that we get him to the right spot.
Okay, city engineering office. Okay. I think we nailed that. We're more than welcome to. Commissioner Villarreal?
I have a couple questions for the applicant, if you probably don't mind coming up. Since this is in essence a greenfield lot, I'm wondering to what extent do you expect these houses to already be prepared for things like electric vehicle charging inside the garages? Do you anticipate having these houses be developed with an eye towards having either EV-ready houses or be prepared for things like level 2 charging to be installed in the garages?
I don't know if I could specifically say yes or no to that. I guess ultimately these houses are being customized to the individual buyer. So if a buyer wants that, item, they can definitely ask for that and negotiate that as part of the purchase of the house. Is it going to be something that's going to be a standard? I'd probably say no at this point, but that doesn't mean they might not be put in these houses either.
So would that be to say then that the developer and the owner would be the ones sort of anticipating how the electricity is going to be installed? In other words, are these going to the locations of where the panels are going to be on the house?
I guess I'm not following what you're asking exactly.
So I'm trying to get an idea of when the houses get built, that relationship is between the builder and the owner, not with you, correct?
Well, if you're asking where the panels go and how they hook up to the electric, a lot of that has to do with where the electrical boxes are. Once the streets go in, we have to come back and put in electric, gas, phone, cable, those
Right.
items. And at that point, they put those boxes out on different property corners. And a lot of times where those panels go are based on where they get their electric service from.
Right. And so what I'm trying to get at is, since this is a relatively green field where you're taking out, well, I guess there's already a transformer on one of the lots. So you're taking out the transformer, you're going to have to Excel's going to have to come out and upgrade the distribution system in that neighborhood. And it seems to me this would be an opportunity to prepare this new neighborhood for the new technologies coming along, like electric vehicles. And so the question is it who's going to be the responsible party in this development to identify where these how these houses are going to be constructed in relationship to something like the electricity grid?
Well, the builder would be the one who would design the house, and we will be in conjunction working with the builder. Mark, as the owner, is also a licensed realtor, so he'll actually be part of the sales team for the builder. So as a developer, we will be involved all the way through the process, from the development of the land, putting in the streets, to all the way to the finished house. So it's not like we sell the lots off and we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Mark will be involved in that process as it moves forward. Now, as a specific thing like the electric, that comes with the design. We get a design from the electric company. And I know I had asked staff earlier today about getting a list of all the different companies so we have the correct contacts as we move forward to start getting design in place. So once we get a design for the electric, for the gas, they typically do joint trench and a lot of this stuff. We can look at where the transformers go and where the boxes go and then kind of determine that. But typically what side of the house the panel goes on, a lot of time that's based on where the design is of that thing. So we're
Right, and because what I'm trying to anticipate here is having the panel be as close as possible to the garage to minimize the cost of putting in a new panel for electric vehicle infrastructure.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's something we can look at and the individual construction, but it's being custom homes, we don't have a design of any specific house or how it's going to be laid out at this point. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint that at this stage of the game.
My second question relates to the trees the trees you all are going to I was going to say build, that's the wrong word, plant. Do you have an idea of what the height of those trees are going to be? And I'm thinking of it, again, particularly in relationship to the potential installation of rooftop solar. Rooftop solar is more beneficial when roofs are facing southwest or west. And again, I'm just sort of thinking with an eye towards making it easy for a future homeowner, if they so desire. Trees can sometimes become a challenge on the cost effectiveness of solar if it's too shady. And so the question is, as you are plotting out where you're going to put these trees, are you sort of thinking about having them in not being so tall as to provide too much shading on top of the roofs? Or are you sort of thinking about how you're going to plan out these trees in relation to that topic?
I guess the way it's laid out wasn't really taking into account potentially solar panels on the roofs themselves. If you do look at our layout, though, we don't have a lot of lots conducive to that southwest-west facing, so that's part of the problem. If you look at the planting schedule, we do have trees like maples and lindens and some oaks that over the years can grow up and be fairly tall. Now, this is going to take a few decades to get there, most likely. The one thing I will say is, we've got lot 1 and 11 on the corner of the cul-de-sac. If you look at the trees adjacent to the side yards there along Beverly Drive, those are mostly spruce trees. Therefore, they may not eventually get as tall, but at some point they could. But we really haven't, taken that into account just because there's, like I said, not many lots here. And we think the trees are of value. I know that lots on Eden Prairie Road, there's such a wooded canopy to the west of those that there's really not much we can do there already with the tree factor. So
I agree that trees are value. I'm just trying to extrapolate how strategic they're going to be located.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, why don't you stay up there at the podium for just another minute? I have one or two questions for you. In the staff report, I think there was a brief synopsis, or maybe it was your letter to us about the neighborhood meeting that you held. Could you just say a few comments about that neighborhood meeting, the outcome, and who all was there?
Yes. So there was probably, 15 to 20 residents, maybe a little more there that evening.
Okay.
Mostly people within the general vicinity of the neighborhood coming. I guess some of the comments, there are some specific questions about the houses, the size, the price points, different things like that. There was also comments about, once the construction starts on these homes, about, debris flying around, and there was a comment about dirt blowing in the wind after a basement's dug, and different things like that. One of the things was, how are you going to guarantee as a developer that these things get looked at? And as I kind of just mentioned a second ago is, as we go through and sell these lots, Mark will be a part of the process with the sales of the individual homes. And I also will be available all the way through the development process, managing more of the front end with the cul-de-sac construction, grading, things like that. So, we provided our cards and numbers and contact information for those things if they do come up. Now, obviously, traffic and things like that, there's probably going to be a day or two here or there where you got cement trucks coming, you got a framer out there. That's the nature of construction, and there's really no way around, getting around that when you're building homes, especially when you have multiple homes going at the same time. And obviously, this neighborhood and this area in general has seen a lot of construction over the last 5 to 7 years, and they're slowly getting less and less lots and less property. And as a developing area, that's kind of the stages you go through. Obviously, we're a newer development coming in here towards the end of this area being developed. but, we're going to have a lot of the same things going on. But we are there as the developer and will be involved. And like I said, it's we're local, the builders will be local. So, we've been here before and done different things like this in the past. So that's a lot of the big questions that came up. I know there was some additional questions, just, general questions about the development, access onto Beverly Drive, traffic. I think there was a comment about Eden Prairie Road and if that would be shut down. We don't ever expect Eden Prairie Road to be shut down because we were required to not allowed to tap into the services out in, or the mains out in that road, but put new mains in the boulevard areas and things like that, so.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. One last point I had a little bit mixed messages tonight about your best efforts to contact other property owners north of you for the assemblage of a greater, larger project.
Yes.
Could you tell us about your process and what those other landowners had to say to you?
Yes, so to start out, this process started late last summer, I want to say. I can't remember the approximate date off the top of my head. And we kind of did some real general concept stuff. We called a meeting with city staff. We met with them at that time. We were just dealing with the Beverly Drive property. At that meeting, we had talked about different layouts, cul-de-sac versus the through road to the north, different things of that nature. And we were, it was recommended to go out and try to assemble some properties. That's when we went to the property on Eden Prairie Road, the Carlson property, and we ended up working a deal out with them to include that. And there's some things that helped out with the overall site, with the ponding, and just being able to potentially save some more trees, do some different things that way. We did not contact Mr. Bunn on the corner down there. His layout, we assume, would be some lots split off onto Beverly Drive, and that could happen whether we buy it now or he sells it at a later date. It really doesn't change how he can lay his property out potentially with what we're doing. The property to the north, the Pemtom property, we did not contact them. And the reasoning is they're not directly adjacent to us. There's a strip of land that's owned by D.R. Horton that's really a barrier to connecting these properties development-wise, street-wise, even the sidewalk that we're dealing with. We have to cross their property in order to get to Prospect Road with the sidewalk. So that was the main reason. The other reason is, and this kind of gets into the whole Prospect Road discussion about connections and different things like that. If you look at our cul-de-sac and for instance, lots 6 and 7, we're at an elevation with our garage road of 906. If you go down the hill kind of northwest into the Pemton property, you're down to roughly 860. So we're talking 40 to 50 foot drop in elevation. And that is the main reason why we're saying a through road isn't feasible, because you have to drop your grade so much to catch up with those grades. And by doing that, you're taking out literally every tree in that area to get those grades to work. So we proposed a cul-de-sac so we can balance the dirt on our site rather than hauling 30,000 yards off. I mean, that's 45 days of dump trucks back and forth, just getting that dirt off of this property to make grades work with the through street to the north. So that's the main reason. Secondly, that property with that hill and that D.R. Horton physical barrier, the Pemtom site doesn't really benefit us in a way that's feasible for us, because we have those, that hill and that other property in between, and that's the main reason why, we had not gone that direction. And I know we did talk with the Pemtom people right around the time of our neighborhood meeting about 3-4 weeks ago. I can't remember the exact date, and had that discussion, kind of went through that same thought process. But, from a staff perspective, it's always nice to see all these properties coming in, as one big chunk and, designed out. But the problem is the more you add, the more expensive it gets. And as you know, development's a very expensive, proposal to do this type of work. And comes a point when, do we just want to keep spending millions of dollars? Because that's what it is, millions of dollars to do this stuff for stuff that really doesn't have a benefit to our site, from an individual. We have 16 lots being proposed, and that's a good project. And, it lays this out. And like I said, the main items with Prospect Road going east-west and going north to Cirrus Way, whether we have a cul-de-sac or a through road, it doesn't really affect the east-west Prospect Road connection or north to Cirrus Way one way or the other. And like I said, you can lay out streets and lots any way you want on paper, but the real challenge is what's on the ground, and that's a hill. That's pretty steep and a lot of grade difference. So
Sure. One more point of clarification. You used the word a barrier lot on this D.R. Horton parcel a couple times now. Did you contact them to see if that lot was available, and what do you mean by barrier?
Well, so I talked to them end of last summer, early fall. I don't remember the exact date. And at that time, they didn't really know why they kind of had like, it's there, it is what it is. I know there was some numbers kind of thrown around at one point of what they wanted to sell it for. And like I said, you know, that, just so you know, what's in that lot is electric, gas, phone, and cable. When they did their high point of Riley Creek, they brought all that up from Eden Prairie Road, and that's why they have that property. All that runs electric gas through that area, and that feeds that developments to the west. So that's what that was needed for. Now, why they still own that, I have no idea. You know, if it should have been dedicated as an outlot as part of that plat to the city, or if they retained ownership. But if essentially they have a lot that either we have to purchase or we have to get some sort of easement across if you ever want a road or a sidewalk or anything to cross that property, because it's private property. So that's what kind of why I look at it as a lot. Now, I have talked to him here just recently. On the 4th of March, we got this condition about crossing that with the sidewalk, which was last week. And I just didn't get an answer before the meeting here tonight, so.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. Appreciate it. Does anybody have any more questions of Mr. Anderson before we close the public hearing and deliberate? Thank you, Mr. Anderson. You may be seated. Utilities in D.R. Horton's property. I didn't see that on the existing conditions survey. I guess I just missed it. But the depth of those utilities and anybody's ability to then grade down to Prospect Road from this property seem to be significantly reduced. What do we know about the existing utilities running just north of this development site?
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I'm not fully aware of what's there either, but just as a general rule of thumb, those types of utilities that he's mentioning are within 4 feet of the ground surface, unless they pre-planned for digging them deeper or putting them in deeper. So yeah, they would cause a challenge for connecting a road between there and to the north parcels.
Okay. So there's probably a low probability that there was forethought at the time of that development as to whether or not the grades would suggest that those utilities should be further buried than what would have been necessary as a minimum, so as to preclude any problems with road extensions.
There's a likelihood that it was considered at one point, but whether they were installed that way is low.
All right. All right. I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing so that we could further deliberate.
Yes, another question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bunn, would you like to approach the podium? You may. Public hearing is still open.
A couple things that were meant. I'm sorry, Chris Bunn, 9850 Eden Prairie Road.
Thank you.
Some of the questions you had regarding the nature of what was being built here, and they're very specific. And that underscores the point that I was trying to make, is that I'm not really sure what it is you're approving other than lots. And you explained there's a fairly loose connection between the obligations of the builder and what we're hearing tonight. There's nothing that the city can enforce in terms of what they're actually going to build there. And that was part of my concern originally. And a number of questions that were asked went to that point. Secondly, no one's mentioned the additional 2 driveways onto Eden Prairie Road. In my time living here since 1998, I was always under the impression that we did not want more driveways on Eden Prairie Road. There's a god-awful flag lot just south of me on the Pulte development that has to go all the way along the front of the lot on a lengthy driveway just to avoid going to a drive to Eden Prairie Road. And now we're adding 2 more driveways to Eden Prairie Road. That wasn't discussed here. I'm not sure why. And then finally, too, is what is the precedent regarding this? If you approve this 9.5 zoning, does that mean the neighboring parcels can enjoy that as well, too? Am I allowed to go ahead and divide my lot into, say, 3 units for X? When I inquired a couple of years ago regarding that, I was told 13.5 was my designation to use for dividing my lot. And now when I have this going in next to me, does that mean, given there's no buffer, there's no graduational change, am I able to use that same zoning in my lot as well? Or because I can't establish the same averages that they can achieve, that would not be an option for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bunn. I'll try and take a stab at some of your comments. First of all, while your property isn't subject of our review this evening, I would encourage you to contact the zoning department staff and ask about zoning options if you wish to subdivide your property. We don't believe there's anything going on with this development that would preclude subdivision of your parcel. In the future, you have access on 2 roads. Whether it's of certain density or not, that's right now between you and staff, and that subdivision would eventually hit our desks. In terms of what approvals we are looking at tonight, we're looking at a rezoning application solely, and we are looking at the,
Platting.
preliminary plat. With those 2 applications, we do not have a site plan review on our docket to look at architectural standards. We have encouraged, and staff has done an excellent job of encouraging applicants to come forward voluntarily with standards that we can feel comfortable with for discussionary purposes, but we're not here to impose those architectural standards as part of our preliminary plat review or our rezoning application. I would ask staff maybe to comment on his 3rd question about the additional driveway curb cuts out onto Eden Prairie Road. My own take of it is that the topographical features of this development parcel suggest that they're best handled off of Eden Prairie Road, but in terms of safety, speed limit, and other concerns that this neighbor may have, could we offer some words of comfort?
Yep, Mr. Chair, thank you, members of the commission. Just like you said, with this combined 2 lots here and the benefits that the cul-de-sac with the frontage on Eden Prairie Road is adding to this this site, staff feels that those additional driveways there are adequate. This section of Eden Prairie Road has relatively low volume, relatively speaking, to other streets of its similar nature in the city. Safety-wise, like I said, not a lot of traffic, relatively speaking, on a road like Eden Prairie Road here. To add these 2 driveways in here, likely, potentially, an additional 1 or 2 to the north there. We don't see that as a major concern.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, any last minute
Mr.
comments?
Schulze, I have a question for you. As you know, Flying Cloud Drive, County Road 61 is under phase construction. And what about the anticipated traffic volume once that connector is complete? And with respect to the addition of these lots and the people will be living in that cul-de-sac, how that would impact the traffic flow at the intersection of Beverly and Eden Prairie?
Sure, members of the commission. I will admit that the additional traffic is going to grow on Flying Cloud Drive on County Road 61. But I will also admit that over the years, the traffic along that corridor has actually decreased quite significantly with the addition of 212. And so the addition of 16 units on this cul-de-sac won't make much of a difference to the overall traffic through this section. Either will the connection through Flying Cloud Drive down to the bottom of the hill. Even with the Eden Prairie Road is also getting reconstructed down to connect that as well, make that a safer connection. But we're going to see people exiting and going through that area as they were before, relatively small amounts of traffic, relatively speaking.
Is there a traffic study planned for that neighborhood, for Eden Prairie Road?
I don't believe there is, but as we do counts on those types of roads, we see the patterns develop over time. This is a state aid route, which we do see traffic counts on it regularly. Okay.
Is there a speed limit trigger at which you would recommend a driveway T-bone inside someone's lot so that they could pull out in the forward gear instead of backing out onto a road?
I would say, with this being a 30-mile-an-hour road, I would say that's not justified. But even just to get to 35 in this situation, like let's say Anderson Lakes Parkway through town, there's not a lot of driveways on there. That's more of a commercial area. Even that speed limit, I would say that would be recommended.
Okay.
That's what it is now. Actually, it's 30.
Yeah, you said it's 30 miles an hour right now. So maybe if it grows to 35 or something like that, if speed becomes a problem, might be worthwhile.
Which we don't have any plans to change that
You don't
speed
have any,
limit.
right, thank you.
Right.
You don't have any plans, okay. All right, appreciate that. Commissioner Villarreal.
Yeah. I have a question for staff to follow up on what Commissioner DeSantis was asking about traffic study. What usually triggers a traffic study? Because I'm thinking that if more of the areas around where this development begins to get filled in, when does a traffic study get triggered for that intersection of Beverly and Eden Prairie?
Sure. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, typically in our handbook, a traffic study is triggered by more commercial type development. We're looking at other metrics to judge when to do a traffic study, or different type of tiers, I guess you'd say, for when to trigger a traffic study, or more of a traffic analysis just to know what's going on. We've recently talked with some other engineering firms that we use for traffic studies, and one of the lowest tiers is just basically based on traffic generation. Anywhere from 0 to 100 trips a day is where that lowest tier was going to be, and that's going to be analyzing intersections like 1 block away, such as Beverly and Eden Prairie Road. This would not even rise to well over 100 there with this type. If we saw a massive one like the development down there, Watkey Crossing, that one that just south of this area, that I believe we did do a traffic study for that, because you're going to see higher traffic generation from a development like that. But as they come in pieces through this area, they're not going to individually require a traffic study. Over time, as we see some additional traffic through there, it may be a staff decision to set up additional counts just to get a handle on what's really what's going on there.
Mr. Chair, if I can add on to that comment.
Yes.
In addition, as smaller developments come in, certainly staff is aware and does their research with regard to any traffic incidents that occur there, any concerns that are placed by residents. If we get a lot of calls about a particular intersection, and that's kind of on our radar, if you will, and then all of a sudden there's a development proposed within proximity to that, that is certainly something we look at through the development process, and we ask for the developer maybe not to provide a full-fledged traffic study, but as Mr. Schulze mentioned, a traffic analysis in order to understand a little bit more about traffic counts, traffic patterns, how traffic might be redistributed with additional roadway construction. So we do take existing conditions into account when looking at these, what I'm going to call infill properties, that might be a little bit smaller in nature than your Reeder Ridge developments that exist to the south of Beverly Drive.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, Commissioners, at this point, I think I'd entertain a motion to at least close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, move to close the public hearing.
Motion by Kirk.
Second.
Is there a second by Villarreal? Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Commissioners, closing comments, thoughts, what are your feelings?
I'll start.
Yes.
I think on the whole, the development of a cul-de-sac makes sense. I understand the challenges of extending Prospect all the way to the end, and I think a lot of that all makes sense. What I think Mr. Bunn was getting at, what my questions were actually trying to get at, is I think, just from my own personal view, I think there's too many lots trying to be shoehorned into this section. And knowing what staff just said about if these plots and other developments start to come in a piecemeal manner, there won't actually be a traffic study that any one of these things will actually trigger. I think that is something that we should at least be considering of, be in consideration of, and thinking about adding 14, or I guess 13 new houses into this neighborhood on Beverly. That I think that we should be having an eye towards what will happen with 13 new houses on Beverly. What will happen when there are more houses show up in and around the Beverly neighborhood without any other access onto Eden Prairie Road. So those are sort of my concerns right now. My concerns are just being too many houses trying to be put into this on the existing request.
Anyone else?
I just make one comment. The Pulte property to the south, I guess, of this area, across the street on Eden Prairie Road, is a very large, 92 some odd, fairly large lot homes, and they've been there for some time now. And it's always been of some concern to me that there would be some impact over there, but I don't seem to hear anything. But this is an additional new feature of this whole neighborhood, so it could spur some other things happening that might have to draw staff's attention in ways that we don't know right this minute exactly what we'd be looking toward. But it's a very active area in terms of what's happened in there for the last 5-10 years. That's all.
Commissioner
I'll
Cook?
share my comments. Like most of the developments we face, they're just a series of trade-offs here. And what are the best trade-offs and what's the best balance to do? And I think this public hearing and all has been a good one. I think we've gone into everything that I was thinking of. Number of lots. It's that trade-off of number of lots versus, the financial viability of a development and the ability to actually develop the land. And a cul-de-sac, trees versus maybe optimal road structure, things like that. How much do we value those trees? And I think your comment about saving one more heritage tree is a very positive one. We should take efforts like that. The one that I was kind of hung up about that I didn't ask a question on, but we talked about it a lot, was the 9.5, the R1 9.5 versus the R1 R113. And I hope, and I haven't looked at the details, but I hope very much that the developer on those larger lots, and in fact, even on the lots that are under say just under the 13,000 square foot, that they maintain the setbacks as the R113 would have. Obviously that's not a requirement, but I would hope that would be done. There are a few lots where it's going to get a little tight in there, and again, that fits into the trade-offs. Traffic, always an issue, but rarely have we seen it become a major issue in a purely residential area. To be honest, I've been on the commission now for 14 years, and I don't think we have any feedback of a residential development where traffic became a major issue. Only where there was a commercial development close by or involved has it gotten messy enough that traffic studies and all were warranted. So my experience there says I don't think we'll see an issue on that. So in general, I think the trade-offs, in my mind, support this development. I think it's a reasonable set of trade-offs for what we're given and the realities of what we have to offer and the economic realities. So I would generally support this project.
Thank you. Commissioner DeSantis?
In toto, the concept seems reasonable. I have several concerns. One is a generic one. How does this contribute to affordable housing in Eden Prairie? And we're looking at units that will range from 500,000 to 900,000. And obviously this is going to be a very select market of people who will be looking at these homes. So that's kind of a generic concern I have. The second is, this seems to me from the standpoint, again, this is a bit premature because this is a matter of rezoning and preliminary plat, but we're looking at a long-term city plan of sustainability and carbon mitigation. And so my hope would be that as this process moves along, that the city could incorporate language in the development agreement that addresses Commissioner Variel's concerns about the charging stations, the location, also the possible introduction of solar shingles and other features to a smart home, and that this could be a demonstration project going forward for the city of Eden Prairie to demonstrate how we are responding to the global warmer challenge.
Thank you, Commissioner DeSanctis. Commissioner Meddy?
Just to, I guess, summarize my comments, I'm on the same page as a lot of you. I think the site has a lot of challenges dealing with the grading and some of the unique situations. I've come to the conclusion after all the discussion, I think this is the best plan for the site. I think that I don't have a problem with the 9.5 as opposed to the 13.5. I think that really what's skewing that is the couple of lots on Eden Prairie Road, which are a challenge to make any bigger than they are. So, I think overall that this kind of meets what I think makes sense for the neighborhood. I'm also generally a proponent of, slightly more dense single-family housing like we've seen in the last project that came through. This adds to our tax base. I think making some changes that might eliminate 2 homes is just 2 homes less in our tax base. So I think we have to, consider those factors as well. And also, with regards to traffic, I think the future ability to connect Prospect should, theoretically, that's what we're talking about to help mitigate concerns down the road. So, I'm confident that with that ability, there shouldn't be any issues as things continue to develop here. And then lastly, on the affordable housing, I know this is something that's still in discussion with the city council and what do we do? And right now we don't have a requirement for single family homes. But of our, if you take our affordable housing policy as a whole, I think this is the one that is the most challenging to enforce any sort of requirement here, because I think the affordable level is something like 250,000. So I don't know how much the developer's even paying for just the lot alone, much less what you can build then for 100,000, whatever's left after the cost for building the lot. So, it's financially infeasible. So it's a tough conversation. I don't have an answer to it, but I think it's something we continue to talk about. Overall, though, I'm in favor. Actually, Commissioner Kirk, your comment about maybe holding the lots that are 13,000 and over to the higher setback is an interesting one. I'm not sure how the city enforces that, but I think that, again, because of, the couple lots here that are smaller are kind of due to the uniqueness of the grading and the challenges on the site. I'd rather see that extra house or 2 be in there than remove it. So that's sort of where I'm at with everything.
I think I agree with both Commissioner Kirk and with Ms. Meddy. I think this is an adequate effort to try to come up with something that works on this particular piece of property over at the development area that's been very highly sought after by developers, and I'm really appreciative of that. I think that there are some issues about the zoning that speak to the properties there on Eden Prairie Road, and particularly the property that's not part of the development. But I do encourage you to go ahead and visit with people on staff here and see what might work in your case, if you decide to develop that property as well. But in any case, I think there are some possibilities of more affordability still here in this area of the city. Probably not as much as might be available, but in the future, I think we'll be trying to find ways to work with maybe other kinds of incentives for people who are willing to try some things. But it is here, I think we have the answer for at least the trade-offs that we're going to get out of this. So I'm okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. I think this is a great site plan. Personally, I like the way that the thought was given to the topography, saving transitional zones vertically between the lower lots and the higher lots, and leveraging what the land is really trying to say. Despite the fact that it's not all-inclusive going north with all of the available properties along Eden Prairie Road to the west, that's okay by me, especially knowing a little bit more about that utility barrier north of the site. But regardless of that, I think that the layout solution is very good. I appreciate Commissioners Villarreal and DeSantis carrying our flag here on sustainability, climate change, best practices moving forward with home design. Be aware of that. And it's on our doorstep, and let's just not keep doing what we have been doing because there's change ahead. I have all the confidence in our city engineering staff to design our roads properly, especially in single-family residential areas. We have a very good track record. They look forward to all of the lands around any future street improvement project to be eventually developed. And this is an infill site, and I'm sure that the capacity of all these homes is taken into consideration in the current road design. And given the lack of safety concerns, which I didn't hear tonight, I'm sure the roads are at full enough excess capacity to handle these 17 additional single-family homes. From a density standpoint, I'm not bothered by the one-up of density from 13 to 9.5. I think the savings of trees and the overall market demand, which is probably guiding this more than anything, is a sound criteria for us, and there doesn't seem to be any harm done. So I'm in support of the project. Absent of any other concerns, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kirk.
move to recommend approval of the zoning district change from rural to R1 9.5 on 6.86 acres. Preliminary plat of the 2 lots into 17 lots and 2 outlots on 6.86 acres based on the staff report dated March 7th, 2019, and the plan stamp dated March 1st, 2019.
Motion by Commissioner Kirk. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Meddy. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
One opposed. Motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have no planners report, I don't believe, this evening, Julie. Members report, anybody? Continuing business, I don't believe we have any continuing business. Any new business? Not aware of. Otherwise, I'll have a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn the Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Villarreal.
Second.
Second by DeSantis, motion by Villarreal. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.